If our goal is to get to a universe of, let's say, 100 voters, if 50 of them vote early, the data is updated immediately, that ground game can spend the rest of the election focusing on only 50. So you make it easier for the ground game where we already have an advantage. We build on that advantage by voting early because it means we can spend more and more time on people who maybe need a little bit more of a conversation to vote. So your voting early is good for you, but it's also good for the team.
Hello, and welcome to the PoliticsGirl podcast. I'm your host, Lee McGowan. Let's get into it. Well, we're right at the wire now. 1 week today, and we decide which direction our country is going, forward or back. This election isn't a battle between two candidates or two parties. It's a battle between two Americas, one with democracy and one without. And there's no sugarcoating it. Donald Trump has said he wants to be a dictator. Project 2025 functions entirely on reshaping the government around such a person, and loyalty will be the first and final command. There is a reason military leaders and former Trump advisors are putting themselves and their careers on the line to sound the alarm for rising fascism and calling Trump an existential danger. Trump himself is busy calling the autocrats of the world his friends, while calling anyone who doesn't bow to his whims the enemy. But all is not lost. In fact, there are definitely way more people around this country who want nothing to do with what the MAGA Republicans and their Christian nationalist allies are offering. To talk about the stakes, I am joined today by writer, democracy activist, and former chair of the Ohio Democratic Party, David Pepper. David teaches election and voting rights law at the University of Cincinnati College of Law, is a regular on MSNBC, CNN, C-SPAN, and the author of Laboratories of Autocracy, the book that was called arguably the most important book about the erosion of democracy in America, and Saving Democracy, which we all know we have to do. A graduate of Yale and Yale Law School, David was a clerk of the Sixth Circuit Court of Appeals, is a senior fellow at the Kettering Foundation, and is all over your social media doing whiteboard breakdowns of complicated political information like your most down-to-earth professor. So without further ado, please welcome my guest from the road in Ohio, author, activist, and democracy's passionate professor, David Pepper. Welcome back, David.
Thank you. It's good to be with you again.
Well, thank you for joining me. I feel like I'm going completely crazy these days. I cannot believe how close this election is. And if we get through this in one piece, I think we need to take a really serious look at everything from the Electoral College to the justice system to our Supreme Court, because this race should never have been this close.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, you look back at the last 4 years, and it is stunning that it is this close. You know, there's a risk that Trump wins. The idea that we couldn't bring accountability to someone who tried to, erase an election result, stage a coup, that we can't even bring that to trial before the next election. I mean, it's outrageous. It's not the voters having to do it is not the rule of law. I mean, that is not how it should work. So I think we should look back, win or lose, and realize we've got so much work to do around reform, around the rule of law, around our overall court system. I mean, it's just so broken. And the risk that we've allowed ourselves to now be in with weeks to go because of all sorts of errors and processes that just don't make sense, it's enormous. So, yeah, I agree. I mean, let's celebrate a win if we have one in a couple of weeks, but this is not good that we're even at this point.
Yeah, no, I agree. Like, let's celebrate the win and then let's get down to work, because I think that there's a lot of things that shouldn't have happened, because not only just allowing this man who's been impeached twice and stolen top secret documents and tried to overturn the government to run again, but in the meantime, having the Supreme Court saying the president sits above the law, that bribery is legal, these kind of things, that cannot be allowed. And then to say, even just take a look at our Electoral College, because this election wouldn't be remotely close without that archaic system. So these are things that we need to really consider.
I get asked on the Electoral College, and I've come around on this. I mean, the problem is not only that you might not get the result that the will of America wants, but the more I travel, and I travel now because of writing these books just like you have, it's also just the fact that only 6 states are feeling like they're part of a presidential election, like that individual voters just don't feel like they're part of it. And at some point, that's not a democracy. And if every voter felt like it was the popular vote and their vote counted, you'd have democracy in Alabama right now because they would be showing up. And so to have a system that leaves out dozens of states, and I feel that way as I travel, that's the other problem is it's just most of America is not undergoing a real democracy because they're basically the Electoral College makes them think their vote just doesn't matter. And that's another problem. And that problem ends up mattering for state level elections and other levels where if you're not engaged in the highest level, then that trickles down to a lack of democracy in many other ways too.
Yeah, no, I often tell people like, don't think that your vote doesn't matter. If you're in a blue state or a red state and you're like, it doesn't really count for the president. First of all, you're negating your own vote. If enough of you came out, it actually would matter. States like Alabama are not necessarily red. It's just that they're blue suppressed and no one bothers to come out because they think they're red. But then on top of that, it's Congress that holds the president accountable anyway. So you have votes for Congress every 2 years. And often people don't bother to vote in those elections either. So I find it very interesting that we are at this point now. And I had a conversation actually when I was in Ohio with a gentleman who was saying, but if we get rid of the Electoral College, then we'll only focus on these big states with these large numbers. And I was like, actually, I don't think that's the case because right now we're only focusing on a small amount of states anyway. They just happen to be swing states. Wouldn't you prefer it if you were a red voter in California that the presidential candidate came to speak to you? Wouldn't you prefer it if you were a blue voter in North Dakota if the presidential candidate came to speak to you? It would be great to have everybody have one person, one vote. And I think that most of us can get our heads around that, whether we're Republican or Democrat at this point. But you recently said that you were concerned that these ridiculous things that are happening around the country, be it, Donald Trump cosplaying as a McDonald's worker or the crazy things he says about like Arnold Palmer's schlong, all these things might be distracting us from the true danger that he and his people pose to America. And we're at this point where people are talking about Hitler and how he might have had some good ideas, and that's not disqualifying. So it feels like we need to get really serious about what's actually happening because although he might sound funny, what he would do would be truly terrifying.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And, and you don't win campaigns only by pointing out the risk of the other side, but we have to point it out. I mean, it really is. And it has gotten normalized. The lies have gotten normalized. A lot of the other crazy stuff has got normalized. The speeches that are meltdowns of his brain. But we also know that they've written a lot of their plan down, which is, frankly, more transparent than usual. Normally, they hide most of their worst acts in gerrymandered state houses that aren't paying attention. In this case, they've written it all down, and we also have things that Trump includes in almost every speech. And my view has, some people, it won't really happen, didn't happen the first time. They're writing this all down for a reason. They called Project 2025 a mandate for a reason. Their goal is to win having said all these things, and then they will say, we'll all hear it, the American people knew about it. They voted for it. We need to do it. That's essentially what they said on the wall. And so my view has been to really take very seriously the things they have taken the time to write down and the things that Trump includes in almost everything he says. And what are some of these things? Revenge, weaponizing the DOJ, using the military against his enemies, using the military against protesters and against groups and people he doesn't like. Every speech almost, it became a regular part of his stump speech. I don't know about recently, but when I was doing all the research on this podcast and book I've written, almost every speech, I will not send money to schools that have vaccine mandates. Why is that in every speech? So there's certain themes that we better pay attention to. And my hope is in the final weeks, maybe we'll win over some voters in the middle. And hopefully Liz Cheney is helping do that and others. But there are also voters who and this happens, think, I'm not going to vote because they're all the same and they're all bad. And we need to convince them to vote. And my hope is some of the worst scenarios that I think are very realistically could happen under what they're saying they're going to do. Hopefully get people to think, you know what, that's just too much. I don't want to risk the military policing protests in Philadelphia. I don't want to risk my kids' school being told, basically, you can't have any more vaccines because you'll lose your funding. So, yeah, I do think walking through some of the worst possibilities, taking what they're saying very seriously, is an important thing to get voters who may or may not vote thinking about. Because the truth is, I think that term one, there were guardrails. Term one, there was a Millie. Term 2, Trump learned that he doesn't want the Vindmans around. He doesn't want the Kellys around. He wants yes people. And so, yeah, some of the worst things that he's talking about didn't happen term 1 because people were there to stop him. Those people won't be there in the second term. And so we should be prepared if he wins for some scenarios that have been unimaginable to be realistically things that could happen if he gets reelected. And we better be very eyes wide open about those risks right now as we close out this election.
I think it's really important that we keep reminding people of these top line points so we can best communicate them with our uncommitted or disinterested friends and family. Because you're talking about things like the Insurrection Act, IVF and abortion bans, attack on workers, on unions, on worker safety, attacks on the environment. As you're saying, no vaccinations in school. He wants RFK in charge of our health. That guy is a complete anti-vax wackadoodle, right? Now we're talking about people like Eileen Cannon as Attorney General. And if anything, that woman has proved she knows nothing about how the law works in America. And we're going to make her the nation's top lawyer, right? They want to defund, which Trump just said, defund our public education, give out Trump's revenge fantasies by turning the entire Justice Department over to the executive branch using Schedule F. And they would be allowed to do it, right? He wants to turn the Justice Department, the FBI, the military on our own citizens. And if the president doesn't like a certain person, doesn't like a certain group, doesn't like a certain thing that was said on the media, that's going to tear our nation apart. Right. And I keep thinking to people like, listen, you use the word risk. And I think that that's the most important thing. Are you willing to take the risk that he's being serious? Are you willing to take the risk that he's going to surround himself with people like Mike Flynn and Steve Bannon and Steve Miller and these guys that will not only say yes, they'll say, let's go further, right? And I keep saying to people like, do you know what happens when a nation is terrified of their government? Do you know what happens when you start rounding people up in camps or you start throwing political enemies in jail? It destroys the economy because the market doesn't like that kind of volatility. I mean, people like me and you will be probably in prison, but people's 401ks are going to tank, right? Yep. You think groceries are expensive now? How much are strawberries going to cost if you round up, what is the number, 11 million illegal immigrants? Who do you think is putting the food on your table? Who is working in the back of restaurants and parking your car and caring for your kids and cleaning your home? Illegal immigrants do a lot of the jobs that Americans need and refuse to do ourselves, or corporations will pay a less than legal wage to get done, right? Yeah. How will removing 11 million of them from our economy not deeply affect the economy, right? Who's paying for this deportation? Everyone talks about Kamala Harris and what are the details of her plans. What is the details of this mass deportation plan? Who is paying for the armed enforcement? Who's paying for this show me your papers Gestapo they're going to put out there? Who's transporting these people? Where are they going? Are we going to fly them all home to their home nations? Who's paying for that, right? So we need to be honest that the plan is to put people in camps, right? They're not going to just let these people sit in camps either. That's going to be a work camp, right? We're going to build work camps in America. Yeah. And like they did in Poland for other people that were, quote, poisoning the blood of the nation. So I think it's really important that Americans get their head around what this really looks like, what these plans that they're putting out there, that they said at the RNC, because we have to be like, are we for real, America? Is this the risk we really want to take?
Yeah. And what's funny is as I put stuff like this out, just taking their words seriously. People say, oh, this isn't true. I'm like, all I'm doing is actually drawing out what they're saying. And then Trump actually, I hate to say it, when he said, I have nothing to do with Project 2025, that actually worked. People are, oh, he said he didn't have anything to do with it. My answer is, the worst things that are on the table are the things coming out of his mouth. Project 2025, in many cases, like the revenge, this is the way it works. He wants revenge. He says it. There's no denying that he says it. Project 2025 gives him the mechanism to do it by getting rid of the protections from an attorney general being political. Just like mass deportation, he's the one who says it. Project 2025 literally says, so it's kind of like an assist. It's the means to his end that he articulates all the time. Project 2025 says, oh, we're going to loosen the regulations on camps so you can have tents. So they all go hand in hand. And the other thing so it all flows together. He's tried to run away from it. They all tie together. But the other one and I say this sitting in a parking lot in Washington Courthouse, Ohio, in case you doubt they'll do it, look at the states where they have complete control. They're already doing it. They're doing the attacks on workers. They're destroying the public schools through universal vouchers, which they promised to do the Project 2025. In Ohio right now, we have a ballot measure to end gerrymandering. Everyone paying attention, every newspaper knows that voting yes on that ballot measure will end gerrymandering. They also know that gerrymandering is unpopular. What does the ballot language in Ohio say when you read it, if you don't know any better? It makes it feel like voting yes will keep gerrymandering, and that voting no will be yes on gerrymandering. So that's just a pure abuse of power. So when people doubt, would they ever do that? Would they ever do that at the federal level? I'm here to tell you, like friends from ours in Missouri would tell you, in Florida would tell you, in Ohio would tell you, hell yeah, they'll do it. Because in Ohio, that's what they're doing. They're literally doing all the worst things we read about: lawlessness, rigging elections through gerrymandering, destroying public education, attacking workers. They'll do it nationally because, in places where they have the chance to do it, they're already doing it. Much of Project 2025 is just nationalizing what abortion bans, IVF bans. They're already pushing these things. So yes, they'll do it nationally, and we know better than anywhere in the states where they've had the chance to do it, that's what they've done, even when they know it's unpopular in many of these states.
Yeah, because who's going to stop them? You think about the Don't Say Gay laws and the, getting rid of the Sunshine Law so the press can't follow DeSantis, so they don't know what he's spending money on, so they don't know where he's going, so they can't follow his travel. These are all things that happen when Republicans get full control. So we don't need to imagine what would happen if Republicans had full control at the federal level, because they show us daily at the state level the way it is. And as you point out, all of this isn't a secret. These aren't their secret plans. They've written it all down. They're saying it out loud at their rallies. We have to be really clear to take them seriously because, like you're saying, we see it right now at the state level. And speaking of writing it down, you recently took on a huge project to try and get people to understand the dangers of Project 2025. Would you tell us just a little bit about that? Because you were doing it so it would be accessible to people. How can laundry just keep coming? It doesn't matter how busy you get, there is always more to do. In fact, I feel like I am perpetually doing laundry because I have to pass the machine to get to my office, and I'm always throwing in a load or doubling back to take a load out. I also have a teenage son who puts things in the laundry rather than refolding them, so I can wear the same jeans for 5 days, but he will still have a full basket of laundry in 2. Which is why I am so pleased that Laundry Sauce has decided to sponsor the show. I was already pretty bougie with my detergent because I like to be good with the environment and I'm not into that chemical smell thing. But Laundry Sauce has partnered with one of the top fragrance houses in the world to bring beautiful, complex aromas made from high-quality ingredients and put them into powerful stain-fighting laundry pods that's not only good for the environment, but smell amazing. From Australian sandalwood to Egyptian rose to Siberian pine, people are loving it. I was reading some of the reviews and they are fantastic. One woman said her bed smells good AF. Someone else said if this laundry soap was food, I would describe it as delicious. And it's not just the pods. They've got dryer balls, fabric softeners, even candles. And the best part, if you're not 100% happy, just send it back for a full refund. No questions asked. Love that. Now is the time to elevate your laundry ritual with Laundry Sauce. Head to laundrysauce.com/politicsgirl and use the promo code PoliticsGirl at checkout for 15% off. That's the best offer you'll find, but you have to use my code PoliticsGirl for 15% off your order. One last time, that's laundrysauce.com/politicsgirl, promo code PoliticsGirl for 15% off. Don't miss out. Your clothes and your nose will thank you. The older I get, the more intentional I try to be about how I live, eat, and take care of my body. As the old saying goes, you are what you eat, and that is why I'm always on the lookout for healthy, convenient snacks that fit into my lifestyle. And as you know, one of my favorite go-tos has become Mosh bars. You might have heard of Mosh on Shark Tank. It was founded by Maria Shriver and her son Patrick Schwarzenegger, inspired by their family's experience with Alzheimer's and their decision to promote brain health. With that mission in mind, they teamed up with top scientists and nutritionists to go beyond the average protein bar. Mosh bars come in 10 delicious flavors, including 3 plant-based options, and each bar is designed with ingredients that support brain health, like lion's mane, collagen, and omega-3s. They've even recently upgraded their formula, now featuring Cognizin, a premium neurotropic that delivers acetylcholine to fuel your brain in the way no other bar can. And the best part? A portion of every purchase of Mosh bars goes towards funding gender-based brain health research through the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. Since 2/3 of all Alzheimer's patients are women, this initiative is working to close the research gap between men and women's brain health. I personally love the lemon and white chocolate. It's the perfect snack whether I'm rushing out the door or I need a quick pick-me-up. And knowing that Mosh bars not only taste great but also support an important cause, that's the best part. So if you want to find ways to give back to others and fuel your body and brain, Mosh bars are the perfect choice. Head to moshlife.com/politicsgirl to save 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestsellers trial pack or the new plant-based trial pack. That's 20% off plus free shipping on either the bestsellers or plant-based trial pack at moshlife.com/politicsgirl. I just ordered 3 new boxes for myself. Thank you, Mosh, for continuing to sponsor this podcast. So, you all know that I love my coffee, but my husband Sean is a different story. He is super sensitive to caffeine, and every time he has a regular cup of coffee, he ends up feeling a bit jittery and off for the rest of the day. That's why he has switched over for a while to mud water, and honestly, it's been kind of a game changer for him. Mud water is a fantastic coffee alternative, made with a blend of organic, functional mushrooms. It keeps him sharp and energized without the caffeine crash he often gets. It's got ingredients like lion's mane, which supports focus and mental clarity, and reishi, which helps you stay calm and balanced. There is also chaga for its antioxidant benefits, and cordyceps, which boost energy and stamina, which is very helpful in a long workday. Sean has been drinking the OG blend, which has a rich, earthy flavor with hints of cacao and chai. You can drink it hot or iced, and sometimes he even uses the frother mud water scent to froth up some milk so it's like a latte. And he's not dealing with the usual caffeine spikes or crashes. It just seems to be steady, focused energy. Plus, every single ingredient in mud water is 100% USDA certified organic, non-GMO, gluten-free, vegan, and kosher. There's no sugar or artificial sweeteners, so it's just a clean, natural source of energy that doesn't mess with your system. If you or someone you know is looking for a different way to start the day, now is a perfect time to try mud water. For a limited time, our listeners get up to 43% off your entire order, plus free shipping and a free rechargeable frother when you use the code PoliticsGirl. That's up to 43% off your order with the code PoliticsGirl at MUDWTR.com. After you purchase, if they ask you where you heard about them, please support the show and tell them we sent you. Whether it's prepping for a busy day in the office or just trying to keep your mind sharp, Mud Water is here to help you feel your best naturally. Start experiencing the benefit of functional mushrooms today. Would you tell us just a little bit about that? Because you were doing it so it would be accessible to people.
My problem is, and they kind of know this, no one's reading the Mueller report and no one's reading a 950-page Project 2025. And they kind of, if they see it summarized as bullet points, maybe they'll read it. And you probably saw the same memes, like the 20 bullet points of Project 2025. And I thought, that's not really going to work, although it'll work some. So sometimes the best way to communicate with people is through storytelling. So what I decided to do, and I've written a lot of nonfiction, but I've also written some fiction, was let's take their promises so seriously that we tell a story around them. And that's what I've done for a number of months. It's called 2025. Every chapter is a month of the year 2025 if Trump wins. And every chapter is a life that's being basically, torn apart by one of his promises. The February chapter is what would having the IVF ban feel like to a woman who's been trying to get pregnant for 10 years and is told in the end, we may have a chance on the biological side, but it's being banned legally, so you're out of luck. The June chapter is mass deportation. Because what does a camp look like in a country that's trying to deport 15 million people? We have a little more than 1 million people in all prisons across the country. So 15 million? We would have hundreds of deportation camps. As you said, we don't know even what they'll turn. We will be overwhelmed by just the actual logistical problem of actually trying to do what they're talking about. So what I've tried to do is is just take it serious enough to try and describe what it would look like, not exaggerating it. Or another one that we just released. And so the exciting thing was that people got interested enough, and you were one of them, that we turned this into a podcast. And just this last week, and by the way, people should know, you were actually, I think, one of our only non-professional actors or actresses, and your chapter on vaccines was amazing. But just this week, we released a chapter from Mark Hamill as an episode of our podcast. He's a soldier in Philadelphia being asked to police a protest. And it's probably the hardest of the chapters to digest, because it basically walks through how quickly it will go wrong when we task Americans in the military to police protests, being told by a president, crack down on them, shoot them in the legs, which is what he says. So what we're trying to do is capture what it would actually be like to have all these promises actually executed upon. And the truth is, again, whether it's no vaccines in schools, the U.S. military policing a protest in Philadelphia, whether it's mass deportation camps, whether it's attacks on workers that thought Trump was going to be their friend, figuring out he's destroyed their lives, all of it is absolutely drawn from exactly what they're saying. And the project was to try and bring real life to it, so people understand how it would play out, as opposed to dismissing it as, oh, that's never going to happen. So my hope is that those who've listened to it or read it, it makes it far more real, which is, I think, how people need to think about it.
Yeah, no, I really hope that people will go and listen to the podcast. It is spectacular, and you got some real talent in there, and I appreciate you including me, because things like getting rid of vaccine mandates is terrifying to me with having my son in school and how quickly that would go wrong. That was my chapter. I did chapter 4. You recently wrote on your Substack, when it comes to Trump, that it's pretty easy to figure out what he wants to do. He talks about it all the time now. He's being very clear he's going to go after his enemies, that he wants the military officers to do whatever he says, that he wants, his generals to be like Hitler's generals. He has his minions all over the media trying to say that what he's saying isn't real, that what he does isn't what he really wants, that he's being hyperbolic, that, this rounding up people is just illegal immigrants. And I think we're being gaslit into thinking that we're crazy to take his crazy talk seriously, but we're not. And as you point out, federal law might prohibit the U.S. military to be used as part of domestic law enforcement. But he's talking about the Insurrection Act. And the Insurrection Act is something he wanted to do in his last term. So this is not new. The Insurrection Act, for people who don't know, is from 1807. It basically removes the law that allows the National Guard and active duty military to be involved in domestic violence. In this case, they are allowed to. They're allowed to get involved with domestic violence, in conspiracy, and any kind of quote unquote unrest, right? So any protest, as you were saying in the Mark Hamill episode, to his presidency, anyone that says, we are unhappy with this, you could send the military out to scare us enough to go home. And I keep thinking about that scene in Handmaid's Tale, which they made for television. And in one case, they have taken the right for women to have their bank accounts. And then they have taken the right for women to work in jobs. And women all go out in the street to protest. And they open fire on the protesters. And the way the scene is shot in this television program, I had to actually stop watching the show because their faces were so shocked that their own government would shoot against them in something that would seem so, it's part of our First Amendment. We talk a lot about, freedom of speech, but freedom of protest is in the First Amendment too. And they open fire on them, but we can think, regular Americans can think, if you protested and you knew that they opened fire on protesters, how quickly would you stop protesting? Pretty quickly, right? This is how you put down an open, free government. And we have to be really clear that Trump wanted to use the Insurrection Act last time he was president. But as you said, it took military leaders to stop him, people that were the guardrails around him, people like his former chief of staff, John Kelly, Mark Esper, H.R. McMaster, General Mark Milley, who is now out on television blatantly saying he's unfit, he's a full-on fascist. It doesn't have to be Donald Trump who does this either. We have to be really clear. This could very easily be J.D. Vance on behalf of the Heritage Foundation or the Federalist Society, a puppet acting for the good of, say, Christian nationalists anywhere. So that is on behalf of God, And when you start thinking of it like that, that's what we're looking at. And I think people need to get really prepared for that.
Yeah, no, I mean, the other thing is Donald Trump is not some law student. He didn't come up with he wants to use the military. Someone else told him, just like they gave him a theory of why he should get to win on January 6th. the reason he's saying Insurrection Act is someone told him that. And thank goodness Milley said, sorry, we're not going to do that. But he's going to be surrounded by enough people who will give him, like Project 2025 clearly does, the path to at least falsely, but at least be able to say to the American people, oh, I have the authority to do this. My lawyers have said X. Now, Mike Pence, in the end, to his credit, said, actually, I don't believe that. But this time he's going to surround himself by people who give him the tools to do these things. And one other point, he knows what you said about violence. He said, I think a few weeks ago, it would only take one day of violence.
Really rough, violence.
Yes, a rough day. That would solve it all. So he's thinking sort of, again, he's got the ends in mind. He says it so often, take it seriously. And then he has enough lemmings, the Stephen Millers who put together both the justification and other things. And what is he not going to allow this time? And this is why the Schedule F thing is so important. He's not going to allow either civil servants or credible political appointees to be anywhere near the decision-making. So next time, no one will be able to say, no, you can't do that. I'll resign if you do it, or you're violating a law.
And just to be clear for people who don't know, Schedule F, if you don't remember or haven't heard of it yet, this is the thing that Trump put in at the end of his last term that Biden got rid of as soon as he came into office. Trump will reinstate it, and it allows them to mass fire civil servants, career bureaucrats, people that have worked in all the offices around America who are government workers, and replace those people with blind loyalists to the administration.
And it's another example when they try and run from Project 2025. I have nothing to do with that. Former President Trump, all Project 2025 is saying here is redo what you already did before. Don't tell us you have nothing to do with it. It's reenacting the things that you already did once. One of the consistent themes of all this is replace scientists, replace experts, replace independent lawyers, replace independent FBI agents. All of them will be replaced by hacks. One of the chapters, by the way, that it may sound a little outlandish, but I actually absolutely believe this will happen, is the leader of the DOJ effort to seek revenge was someone, in the book at least, who was part of trying to overturn the Arizona election. Another person who was put into a major position in one of my chapters was someone who was in trouble for January 6th. Now, that sounds outrageous to us, but when they're looking for loyalists, that's who they're going to look for. The people who they think are the heroes on what now Trump says that was the day of love will be the very people we think were the worst actors on January 6th or election denialists. For them, holding them up as the loyalists will be the way they get more loyalty. So I think what we would see in a world, post-Schedule F, won't just be sort of some Republican county commissioner from Ohio getting a job that he or she's not qualified for. It will be people who broke the law, get pardoned, being rewarded for being the most loyal. And the most loyal were the ones who did things on January 6th or tried to undo the election. I think we will see those types of people becoming very important in a second Trump term, because that will be the greatest way to show absolute, like J.D. Vance shows by being vice president, absolute loyalty, saying you would have gone along with January 6th, what J.D. Vance says, is actually what we will reward in our new system. So I think the possibilities who will be in positions to make decisions, we're going to see some of the worst people put into them, because they also happen to be people who've been the most loyal in moments where everyone else with any common sense left, but they were the ones who were still willing to go that far. They're going to be the people who are going to be most important in the second Trump term, which should scare the hell out of all of us.
Yeah, we're looking at cabinet members like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Matt Gaetz and people
and Eileen
like that.
Cannon. Right, exactly.
Yeah, Eileen Cannon, yeah. I understand that people might feel like this idea of U.S. troops patrolling U.S. cities, cracking down on government enemies, doing broad sweeps of, town squares and restaurants and, your movie theater, looking for everyone from illegal aliens to political dissidents might feel impossible to people, but it's not. It happens in other countries every day. It has happened throughout history. So I think rather than dismissing it, we would be far better off imagining what it could really look like so we can not only make the right decision in November, work as hard as we can until November, but also be prepared for what these people might do if they lose, right? Because you were talking about the episode you did with Mark Hamill, this idea of using the military against the American people, he's saying that out loud now. So this is not something we can pretend isn't going to happen. But I think it's not just big picture things that people might think might happen to Democrats in blue cities, right? Oh, it's just going to happen to the people in LA or the people in New York. You did an episode with Don Cheadle and Ever Carradine that focused on public education, both the elimination of the Department of Education and the money that would be then siphoned off to private Christian schools. But also, as you and I were talking about the episode I did about the removal of vaccine mandates in schools because of government policy and how American children would suddenly be re-exposed to these long vanquished disease like smallpox and polio, because we're not just talking about the COVID vaccine, we're talking about all vaccines. So this isn't just something that will happen over there to those people in those cities. These are huge changes that will take place in every town in America and affect every child in America, whether you're a Republican or not. So while you all know I'm more of a dog person, we do have 2 beautiful cats that live across the street, and we look after them from time to time. They are sweet, picky, and definitely creatures of habit, especially when it comes to food. Our neighbor has tried everything to get them excited about mealtime, but nothing really worked until we suggested Smalls. Smalls is a cat food brand that uses protein-packed recipes with preservative-free ingredients, the kind you would actually recognize if you found them in your fridge. It's no wonder that Cats.com named Smalls their best overall cat food. And those cats across the street? They're obsessed. We did a little taste test, 2 bowls side by side, and they went straight for the Smalls. No hesitation. Their favorite flavor, I would definitely say, is the chicken. Smalls was started back in 2017 by a couple of friends who began cooking small batches of fresh cat food. Fast forward a few years, and they've now served millions of meals to cats all across the country. And I have to say, every time Sean feeds Smalls to those kitties, the smell no longer makes him gag. Cats are actually descended from wild desert hunters, which means they need fresh, protein-rich food to stay happy and healthy. Unfortunately, most commercial cat foods are packed with mysterious byproducts and preservatives, but with Smalls, you know your cat is getting real food. In fact, 88% of cat owners who made the switch to Smalls noticed improvements in their cat's overall health. 88%. That's a pretty big deal. And here's the best part. Smalls is so confident your cat will love their food that they offer a risk-free trial. If your cat doesn't like it, you get a full refund, no questions asked. So give your cat the gift of great food this election season. Head to smalls.com/politicsgirl and use the promo code politicsgirl at checkout for 50% off your first order plus free shipping. That's the best offer you're going to find, but you do have to use my code politicsgirl for 50% off your first order. One last time, that is smalls.com/politicsgirl for 50% off your first order plus free shipping. I try not to be someone who gets caught up in the aesthetics of aging, but I do want to keep my skin as healthy as possible as I get older, which is why I'm excited to tell you about OneSkin. Did you know that as early as your 20s, your body starts accumulating what are called sentient cells or zombie cells? These cells stop producing collagen and hyaluronic acid, which can leave your skin looking and feeling older. Luckily, there's a solution, and it comes from OneSkin. Founded by an all-woman team of scientists, OneSkin is the first and only skin longevity company that targets cellular sentience, the key marker of aging. Their proprietary OS1 peptide is significantly proven to reduce these zombie cells, decrease lines and wrinkles, boost hydration, and help with thinning skin. It's no wonder they have over 4,000 5-star reviews for their entire product line, which includes face, body, sun, and travel size options. Treating the symptoms of aging has long been the norm in skincare, but OneSkin takes a different approach. They're focused on optimizing your skin at the cellular level, so it's more resilient to the aging process. In fact, in a third-party 12-week clinical study, OS1 Face was clinically proven to strengthen the skin barrier and diminish visible signs of aging, with 87% of users seeing a reduction in wrinkles. So if you are ready to see what OneSkin can do for you, now is the time. OneSkin is the world's first skin longevity company. By focusing on the cellular aspects of aging, OneSkin keeps your skin looking and acting younger for longer. Get started today with 15% off by using the code politicsgirl at oneskin.co. That's 15% off at oneskin.co with code PoliticsGirl. After you purchase, they're going to ask you where you heard about them, so please support the show and tell them that we sent you. OneSkin is truly next level skincare because we only get one skin, and that skin deserves the best. These are huge changes that will take place in every town in America and affect every child in America, whether you're a Republican or not.
I tried to focus on that because the podcast is technically Trump's Project 2025 up close personal. This would affect everyday lives in not just sort of blue states or Democrats. And I try to get into stories that would make, most parents, Republican, Democrat, are pretty glad their school checks vaccines. I'm a parent, you're a parent. That's just something that we take for granted. And the prospect of it, one reason Robert Kennedy is viewed as extreme and hasn't done very well is because the prospect of not having that is toxic. It is a politically toxic idea. It may get attention, but the average person still thinks that's crazy talk. By the way, destroying rural public schools is hugely unpopular. No one wants, where I'm sitting, again, Washington Courthouse, small town, there's not some private school near here where they can take their voucher. If one pops up because of a voucher, it's going to be some scam. That's going to be some strip mall school that doesn't teach kids anything versus the school that everyone goes to in Washington Courthouse. If people see that for what it is, they won't like it. And another one, and again, I'm sitting in a red county. Do they want their money that goes to their public school to go pay wealthy kids in a suburb of Columbus to go to the same private school they've always gone to? No, they'd be outraged if they knew that. Just like, again, one other chapter is a guy in Pennsylvania who voted for Trump, who thought he was his guy. He's a union electrician. And 9 months later, his union is disintegrating because there's no more prevailing wage and there's no more project labor agreements. And he's figuring it out. So the thing that we really have to do, and this is hard to do in this polarizing time, is a lot of people who maybe aren't on either side of the political debate or think Trump's for them. If you read what he is saying seriously, it will impact a lot of lives of people who think it's about someone else but them. And whether it's schools or workers or vaccines, I try and get into some of those stories to have people see that. Because again, I agree with you. You got to take every word seriously. They will claim a mandate. They will say, he said in every stump speech. What do you mean you didn't think it would happen? You voted for it. We all knew about it. And so all of it, I think, we're much better off taking it seriously than dismissing it, which to me is the most dangerous response. Taking it seriously and thinking through how it might play out in our lives is actually the most responsible decision we can take.
Yeah. And I think people need to understand that when they talk about a mandate, it means the people have asked for this. The majority of the people want this. I have their permission. That is what a mandate is when we talk about that. And when we talk about Project 2025, it is a mandate for leadership. They're saying this is what the people want. And I think it's very important that the people say this actually isn't at all what we want. So obviously there's an incredible amount of dangerous stuff that can happen if MAGA Republicans win. So let's talk about if they lose, because I know you believe, despite the fact that this election is essentially a tie because of the Electoral College, and we should be very clear, it will not remotely be a tie when it comes to the popular vote, Democrats still have the ground game advantage. Tell us a little bit about that.
Well, there are two things. So, yeah, this is all dark, so I don't want anyone to think that I'm running. I mean, no. You and I wouldn't do the work we do if we weren't optimists. I mean, honestly, I'm an optimist.
Honestly.
We wouldn't do this. So I'm a realist about what would happen if we lost. I think people need to appreciate it. There are two things that give me hope. One, since Dobbs, we have overperformed everywhere, consistently, at all levels of the ballot. Now, this is an important thing to make sure as we close, people realize their freedom is at stake and women realize reproductive freedom is at stake, because I think clearly Dobbs woke people up to that risk. And that's why whether it's a special election in Alabama in a Trump district that we flipped after the IVF decision, or replacing George Santos going away when he left, we had a Democrat win, or flipping the Michigan, Minnesota state houses, state senates that gave Waltz and Whitmer trifectas. That was the first time in 50 years a single state house had flipped in the direction of the White House that was there. The Democrats won, even though we had the White House. And it didn't just happen in one state house, it happened in multiple. We flipped Pennsylvania State House in 22 by flipping 12 seats. That's not supposed to happen. So this is historic progress. It defied the polls, It defied the vibes. Remember, people thought we were going to lose Virginia in November of 23. We flipped the Virginia State House. They thought we'd lose the House by a lot more, and we didn't. We didn't lose the Senate. So there's something going on since Dobbs, and what I ask people to do is remember whatever you were doing, grassroots activists, that led to the results in 22 and 23, and keep doing it, because it's actually, there is a winning streak for democracy that gets lost when we look only at the national stuff, but at the more ground level, look at the Ohio reproductive freedom story in 2023. Kentucky, for goodness sakes. So that's one thing. And the other thing that's good to remember, Trump, I believe, and you don't want to overstate anything. I don't know everything the other side does, but he seems like he pretty much destroyed their ground game. He takes over the party. He grabs the money for himself. So right now it's sort of privatized to Musk or others. Maybe they'll figure something out, but that's a high-risk move, destroying your own side's ground game. Our ground game not only is quite strong, but remember, we won in 2020 when we didn't knock on doors because of COVID. Democrats made the decision, which was criticized, but I also understood it. We're in the middle of a pandemic. We think people will not respond well to us knocking on doors. And we still won. Well, now we are knocking on doors. So to the extent we did well in 20 through a ground game that was better than theirs, our ground game, I think, is even far superior than it was against someone who does not have, in Ohio, at least Ohio Republicans tell me, oh yeah, there's nothing really on the ground. It'll be more in other swing states, but I honestly think that if it is a tie, and I agree with you, this is a toss-up. In the states that we need to win, it's a toss-up. How do you win a tie game? How do you win the jump ball? It's ground game. It's getting out the vote. It's voting early. And with however many days ago we have left, a little more than a week, I think it's pretty clear that we have the much stronger ground game, stronger than we had in 20 because we're knocking on doors, which is the single best way to get voters out. And I think stronger than what Trump has. And that's the reason, if you're listening to this, if you're frustrated by what could happen when we go wrong, know that voting early, so you are no longer one of the voters that the ground game has to talk to. You've made their job easier. They now get to spend time on other people. So vote early, but everyone vote early and then use whatever time you have to knock on doors, make phone calls. That's how we win the tie game in our favor in the end.
Yeah, it comes down to effort. At the end of the day, I really want people to remember the same thing, that every single battleground state in this nation is in play. There is still multiple routes to 270 for the Democrats. Yep. And despite the fact that this election is close and it should not be close, it's going to take every single thing we do now is going to matter, right? It matters if we knock on doors. It matters if we write postcards. It matters if you phone bank. If you're sitting there going, should I bother? I don't know. Yes, you absolutely should. It matters if we encourage our kids and their friends to go out and vote, or we tell our apolitical friends that their vote really matters, that we want them to go out and vote. We encourage them to do it because it all comes down to us. I know that people feel frustrated that they are told that every election is the most important election, right? But that's only because the stakes just keep getting higher. And I think we need to tell people, and we need to be out there in the world telling people this election really is a binary choice. And it's a binary choice between democracy and a dictatorship. And if they don't believe that, ask them if they want to take that risk, that perhaps we're right in saying that. It is the binary choice between Americans having the right to make choices about their own body or not. It is a binary choice about protecting Social Security or losing it. It is a binary choice about continuing public education or abandoning it, about being united with the Western democratic nations of the world with things like NATO, or abandoning those relationships to side with the autocrats. I really believe that we can save this country if enough of us choose to fight, if we inspire our friends and family to want to fight, and if we understand enough, which is why things like your project 2025 Up Close and Personal is important, if we understand enough why we need to fight. And I would say to my audience who's listening right now, like, we need you. We need you right now. We can be the country we tell the world we are, but that doesn't just happen. It comes with effort, and we need you to make that effort.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I've seen it happen. And that effort is literally why we won almost every, it's why we won the Wisconsin Supreme Court race. We worked harder. We had a special election. You may remember this on the eastern side of Ohio about 3 months ago. our candidate didn't win, but it was like a 26 plus Trump district. He only lost by 9. That was effort. So this winning streak that has defied polling, that has defied history, well, there are two things. One, they're too extreme and people figured it out after Dobbs. That's why Kerry Lake lost so badly. That's why Mastriano lost so badly. So there's one, they're too extreme. Well, as for all the reasons we talked about, they're right. They're at least as extreme right this moment. Do not forget that. Don't let the McDonald's stop-throughs blind you the fact that they're as extreme as Kerry Lake ever was. J.D. Vance is as extreme as Mastriano ever was. And number two, it was effort. The effort made in all those state-level races and the Secretary of State. We didn't lose a single Secretary of State race in a swing state where we were against an election in Iowa in November of 22. We swept them, which was an upset. That was not what we thought would happen 6 months before. It was effort. It was worry. It was understanding the stakes. So it's not like you and I are just saying this because we hope it's true. The reason there's a post-Dobbs winning streak is because our side, this democracy army, that is more than one party, worked harder than the other side. And in a tie ball game right now, I still think that's what's going to determine it in the end. So, yeah, I agree with you. Just everyone can play a role. And if you're in a state that can vote early, again, this sometimes get lost. Voting early is convenient for you, so do it for that reason. But if our goal is to get to universal, let's say 100 voters, if 50 of them vote early, then the data is updated immediately. That ground game can spend the rest of the election focusing on only 50. So you make it easier for the ground game where we already have an advantage. We build on that advantage by voting early because it means we can spend more and more time on people who maybe need a little bit more of a conversation to vote. So your voting early is good for you, but it's also good for the team.
Yeah. And I think we should tell people that I really do believe we're going to win this election, but it's going to be a mess. So I think we need to work our hearts out. Then we have to be calm while the other side flips out and tries to take it from us, which they will. Then we need to rest. We're allowed to celebrate for a little tiny, tiny bit. And then we have to get right back into the fight. Because as you said, a plus 25 red district went down to a plus 9 red district. And we have to start making really big changes if we never want to be in this place again. So I want to thank you so much for joining us today, David. Please tell people how they can follow your work, find your books, listen to the podcast moving forward.
Okay, I can never remember half my stuff, but I'm at Twitter at David Pepper. On Substack, I think if you just look up David Pepper, you'll find me. If you want to listen to the podcast, and for your own sake, but also with people who may be on the fence, if you
share it,
listen to it. You can find it at my Substack. But we also have a website called Trump's Project 2025 Pod. If you go there, you can access it, by the way, on any podcast format you use. It's available. It will help with some voters who still aren't all the way there yet about why they should vote. I do think it's helping break through with some of them. So, and thank you again for your star turn on it. You were phenomenal. And by the way, it's been really interesting to have something that I wrote be read by really famous people. And it's amazing when you have a Mark Hamill or J. Smith Campbell. Wendell Pierce did the chapter on the worker. That's when you realize, my gosh, those people are talented. Your chapter sounded the same as theirs. So I know you're famous now for this, but you actually are a heck of maybe your background is acting. I don't know. Your chapter is incredibly good as all these very famous actresses and actors. So thank you for being part of it. It was really impressive.
Well, of course. And honestly, it's well written. And I would highly recommend people go and look up Trump's Project 2025 up close and personal, because it's all broken down into chapters. So pick something that someone in your family cares about and send them that particular chapter and say, are you willing to take the risk? Absolutely. And I think that's the best way to do it, because you don't need to do it. It has been described by some of the best actors in this country and painted out what the picture would look like. At the end of the day, I really believe in America. I believe we're going to win this election. And while I know it's going to be a fight to the bitter end, I believe this is a country that is really worth fighting for. So thank you so much for joining us, David. And I know everything is on the line and it feels like it's not right and it's not fair. But as I say to my son all the time, life isn't fair. It doesn't matter if it's not fair. What are you going to do about it? And so I think that's what we need to do moving forward.
Amen. See you on the other side. We'll go win this thing.
See you on the other side.
Take care.
So that was David Pepper reminding us to stay vigilant, to work your hearts out like we're going to lose, but know that we have overperformed everywhere since Dobbs. That despite the fact the country is drowning in negativity and lies, we really are winning. The voters on the ground don't want what the Project 2025 mandate for leadership is offering, but we need to make sure they know what it is and they're not willing to take the risk of getting it. The country's future is on us now, so we need to ask ourselves, what are we doing to save it? I want to thank David for joining us and you for caring enough about democracy to be here. Now go and do something in these last days of what we hope will be the Trump years. Until next week, peachy out. The Politics Girl podcast is written and performed by me, Lee McGowan, in partnership with the Midas Media Network, and produced and edited by Happy Warrior Entertainment. All rights reserved.